Welcome to Gamers Treehouse 2013. This is part 3 of an ongoing series to teach you the very basics of 3D using a popular program called Blender, which you can download freely at blender.org. If you haven't checked out the first 2 videos, I highly recommend you stop watching this. First check out those and then come join us back here. Now, for those of you actually up to part 3, today it's going to be pretty fun. We're going to make our first 3D scene. Now, nothing too fancy. Basically, we're going to have a ground, we're going to have our 3D cube on it, we're going to have sunlight, and the sunlight is going to cause shadow to come off the cube. So, a bit more of a realistic scene. No, it sounds complex, but trust me, it's actually quite simple. Before we do anything, I want you to left click down on the cube. If you haven't already selected it, right click, it's selected if there's a yellow border around the cube, drag it up on the Z-axis, which is the blue line, with the left click button, and just drag it up until it's just not going through the ground anymore. Alright, now that that's done, left click down on the green arrow, drag it to the left. Alright, now first we are going to make the ground. To do that, we use an object called the plane. It's basically a flat piece of paper. So going to the left, we will click on plane, just like we did in the first tutorial, and we've created a little square. Now naturally this is way too small if this is meant to be the ground. I want this to be at least as big as the grid, which is considerably bigger than the cube. To do this, and make sure you have your notepad at the ready, all my tutorials must have your notepad to write down some of the shortcut keys. May seem a bit confusing at first, but you look back to your notepads after and it'll all start to make sense. Now we want to make this bigger, right? In the 3D world, we don't call it making it bigger. What we want to do is scale it. Think of scale as just a fancy word for size. We can scale it smaller, we can scale it bigger. And to scale, you just hit the S key while an object is selected. So with the plane selected, not the cube, the plane, hit the S key once, just once, and as you drag your mouse away, it's magically becoming bigger, or really small, depending on what you want. In this case, we want it to be bigger, so let's drag that out to about there, and then left click to confirm your decision. Congrats, we've already made the ground, and you did that using the plane. Now let's right click back on the cube, left click, drag it to the middle, and then drag it down just so it seems to be sitting right. Okay, that seems about right. Okay, now the next shortcut key, which is important, and you will get your first render out of this, is the F12 key. If we hit F12, it renders the scene. Render is just like another fancy word for, making the end result. The quality you see right now, this is just like the construction graphics. This is just, we want to, manipulate things and we want to do whatever nerdy thing we desire. And then once we're happy with what we've made, then we take like a snapshot, like a camera, except the camera makes it look prettier. So hit F12 just to see what happens now. Congratulations, I know this is barely recognizable compared to what you've been working with, but this is actually a render. You'll notice you have your ground, which is your plane, you have your cube, the light is hitting from right to left, and it has this very strong, defiant shadow happening behind it. Now to get out of this, just hit the escape button on your keyboard, and we're back here. So remember, F12 renders your scene, and yeah, automatically you have light objects. So for example, this thing floating up here, you can right click on it. Believe it or not, that is your sun. Let's hit the del key to focus on it, and we can rotate. This is the sun, and you'll notice there's a line going straight down. That's the direction which the light is meant to be coming from. And this thing here, this black thing, is actually the camera. When we render the scene, we're actually only rendering what can be seen from the camera. So you notice the camera is facing directly to the cube, so that's the angle we'll get. That's why when you hit F12 and you render it, this is what the camera sees. It's always in high quality. Alright, cool. Look, I think this is enough for part 3. Thanks for tuning in. Part 4 will get, a bit more into the nitty details. Just keep in mind this series, I wanted to go as slow as possible. I want you to get a really good concept of 3D. Now, I know you'll be tempted to maybe jump ahead to the more complicated tutorials out there so you can instantly get a more fancy looking final result, but the whole point of this series is to have an easier alternative. I feel those other 3 tutorials out there, they assume you know a lot. The whole point of this is for those that know absolutely nothing and just want to start from scratch. And believe me, if you stick around long enough, it won't be long at all until you'll be making very good 3D, which you can post on Facebook and show off to your friends and share with your family and so forth, except you'll probably have a very good understanding of how you actually did it as opposed to following instructions. Alright, see you guys in part 4. Thanks for tuning in.